Welcome to Gardening Australia. We've got a packed show for you today, full of tips, tricks, and of course, beautiful gardens. First though, let's have a peek at what's coming up.
I'll be weaving some magic with caneberries and currants so they produce bumper crops next season.
I'll be showing you the magnificent reconstruction of one of Australia's oldest ferneries. It's been restored to its former Victorian glory, but with some modern conveniences.
And this is a succulent sphere, and I'm going to show you how to make one so you can let your inner creativity go wild.
I've come to Buderim, an hour and a bit north of Brisbane, to visit an old gardening friend, Barbara Wickes. With husband Rex, Barb has created what I'd call a classic country garden with a twist. I'm particularly fond of what she's done with the area around the lake, but the whole 3/4 of a hectare really is a triumph.
We're trying to create a cottage garden that suits the subtropics. And by using plants that suit this climate, I think it's much easier to achieve that look.
And I love the way that this lake is a focal point of your garden. It's beautiful.
It is. And it was very important when we designed the garden to have the water, have the feature trees, have the deciduous trees and the lovely backdrop, but the tranquility of it.
Now, this didn't just happen, did it?
No, it was a little trickle, and we had a machine come in and create the shape we wanted. And with our little Monet bridge there, we've got that water lily and Monet look.
Seasonality is a key element in a Monet garden. How did you go about introducing that here?
Well, I wanted to bring in that burgundy colour that you get in a cold climate garden with trees such as pruners. So I looked at the Loropetalum China Pink and I thought what a great plant that is to give you that colour. We've undercut these, so the trunks are quite stunning. We've also used them in different forms. We've balled them up here in the patio, and around the garden there's others that are slightly larger, and then we have a couple here at the top of the steps.
Now, the trees form the backbone of the garden. How did you choose them?
Well, I did some research on what does well in this climate. Liquid ambers I found were doing very well, but the colour of the liquid amber is stunning. The swamp cypress are just super. End of May, June, they've got that lovely rusty colour.
But you've also got birch as well.
The tropical birch, they do well and they colour up quite nicely, but most people think you can't create that autumn look in southeast Queensland, but we've proved that you can.
If you're a devotee of good garden design, you'll find all the fundamentals are here. There's a strong north-south axis which forms the spine of the garden. The liquid amber is the focal point which draws the eye across the lake. Barb's plantings are wonderfully colour coordinated, and spacious lawns provide wide vistas and are great for entertaining. There's a lovely sense of airiness and space. How did you go about that?
Well, we wanted to make it easy access for the ride-on mower and trailer. And as you're getting older, you want to be able to get around the garden easily without having a lot of steps.
You've also used gravel, and this is, for me, this is a very English surface for a paths, but it allows the beds to move seamlessly into the path, and you get that lovely scrunch as you walk along.
Yeah. And the perennials really look right with a gravel path.
Yeah, they do. They're perfect. Now, as I cast my eye around the garden, there are distinct zones of colour. This is more towards the yellow.
Yes.
That's more towards the pink. Is that a deliberate decision?
It certainly is. The soft blues, pinks, mauves to the left-hand side here, and then this is the warmer garden. We're getting into the orange apricot tonings and over further into the hot garden.
I love that plant there. That's a cestrum,
Cestrum,
isn't it?
yes. Quite unusual. You don't see that around much.
And this Orlea, it's got some friends in there.
It
Those
sure
beetles
has.
are having a great time, aren't they?
Yes.
Now, it takes a very courageous or foolhardy gardener to fight the climate. Barb knows she can't grow every type of rose in Queensland's humidity.
No, and I think people grow hybrid teas and they're not aware of the old-fashioned teas and chinas that do so much better in our climate. And they tend to flower much of the year. There's very, very few periods where we don't have a flower in the garden.
What's that flowering rose hedge there?
That's the fairy, and that is a tough little rose. It'll grow anywhere, and it makes a beautiful edging to that rock wall.
Now, salvias succeed very well in the subtropics.
They do.
But how do you control them?
Well, you've got to be fairly brutal with them from time to time. For example, that one, probably in another month, I'll take at least 2/3 off it. It looks harsh, but to get it back in a nice bushy plant is really the only way to do it.
Barb is an avid plant collector, and I'll be back later in the programme to look at some of her more unusual specimens.
People love their hydrangeas in summer. They are very ornamental and good value. And if you're down on the coast, you'll find that the sepals of the hydrangea flowers are basically pink. It's because of the lime in the soil. Now, if you live in a volcanic rich soil, you'll find that the flowers are basically blue. And if you want them to be blue, you can do what my mum did. She used to have a bucket when the old nails would go in there, a bit of liquid, all the rusty liquid stuff she'd pour onto the hydrangeas, and that would make them even bluer. Now, if you can't be bothered doing that, you can use sulphur to make them blue, or some more lime to make them pink, or you can go to your nursery where they sell you fertiliser for bluing and pinking of those hydrangeas.
Being Tasmanian, summer to me means sweet, juicy berries and currants. But now, summer is just a memory. However, autumn and winter are a great time to be doing maintenance to ensure good crops next season. I'm starting with the blackberry. You can prune these any time after they finish fruiting. They fruit on second-year wood, so you need to take out the canes that have already borne fruit. These can be easily identified by the spent flowers and fruit heads. They also tend to be a lot more brittle. All I do is find that cane, go all the way to the base, and then snip it off at ground level. Blackberries are usually dreadful weeds in Australia, but nowadays there are sterile cultivars that aren't an environmental threat, and they're also thornless, which makes them much easier to prune. Now it's just a case of making sense of this mess. I like to just basically untangle the whole plant from its supports and pretty much start again. For a plant this age, I'd train it to about 6 good canes, but this will depend on the age and size of your plant and the strength of your supports. Well, there's that plant trained. So all the canes going this way will fruit next summer, and once they're done, I can take them all off at the base. And any new shoots that start in the spring and the summer period, I can train this way, so they can fruit the year after. Now all I'm going to do is put down a bed of compost around the base of this plant to feed the soil and the plant as it goes into the winter. And then I'll put back the straw to act as a mulch to suppress the weeds. Well, that's done. Now on to the raspberries. These are autumn fruiting raspberries. They bear on first-year wood. So once they've done, all you have to do is mow them to the ground, getting rid of all the canes. These, on the other hand, are summer fruiting raspberries. And like the blackberries, these bear on second-year canes. So all I have to do to train them is to remove all the excess stuff, leaving about 6 strong canes. Now, the good thing about raspberries is they're a little bit more rigid in their canes, so they tend to be more self-supporting, which means you can get away without using a trellis. You can prune summer raspberries anytime after they finish fruiting. Now, to make the whole thing more rigid, I'm going to roughly plait these in groups of 3. Well, I think that makes quite a nice feature. Now for something a bit more currant. Black currants to be exact. Now, these guys fruit on first-year wood. So to prune them, all you need to do is remove this darker second-year growth. I like to prune to an outward-facing bud. This means that next year's growth will give the shrub that open goblet shape. Also, it's important to rub a lot of the growth and the buds off from the inside. It'll just end up congesting the plant. That's done. You know those tomatoes that you grow yourself? How they taste far better than anything you can buy at a store? Well, the same can be said for berries and currants. And a little bit of maintenance work now will mean a bumper crop next season. Good luck. I'll see you next time.
Ornamental grasses like lomandras and dianellas can start to look a bit tired after a while. So how do you clean them up? Well, the main thing is don't just chop them halfway up to get rid of this stuff, because they will look terrible. They dry out and look all tatty and brown. You can take the time to pull old dead leaves off by the base like that. It's pretty time consuming. An easier way to go is chop the whole lot right down to the base, just about sort of 7 to 10 centimetres off the ground. And all the new growth, which comes from the bottom, will look lovely and fresh, and it will look terrific.
Can you grow a banana in Melbourne's climate? Well, they're tropical plants, but if you have a very sunny, protected spot, like in a little courtyard, it will absolutely be able to grow. You might take a few more years to get fruit and flower, but have a look up there. There's your bell-shaped flower, there's your fruit, and this is all happening in a very frost-free area. So why not give it a go?
A lot of people ask, how do I stop my coriander from bolting and going to seed? Well, the short answer is timing. Coriander likes to grow into the cooler months, so autumn is the best time to plant. It also suffers a bit from transplant shock, so the best way to plant them is from seed.
In Britain, ferns became so popular that a word was coined for the passion, pteridamania or fern fever. On the other side of the globe, the first director of Melbourne's Botanic Gardens rose to the challenge. This fern gully was one of the first elements created by Ferdinand von Müller in the 1800s, right in the middle of fern fever. Von Müller's replacement, William Guilfoyle, continued to develop the area, and indeed, many of the mature trees in the gully today date from Guilfoyle's tenure. Unfortunately, a combination of overplanting, a long drought, and a colony of destructive flying foxes meant that much of the gully had to be closed to the public. Landscape architect Andrew Laidlaw is responsible for most of the Royal Botanic Gardens redevelopments over the last 10 years, and the Fern Gully has been no exception.
Sure, it is always challenging working in an old historic garden, in the Melbourne Botanic Gardens, of course, and our greatest challenge here was to provide full accessibility for everybody, but not compromise tree health. And tree health in this environment is really important to us.
I understand that this has been put down to protect tree roots, to make sure that as people move through here, you don't get compaction of the soil.
Absolutely. It also has the capacity to be lifted at times. So if after another 15 years we've got ficus roots which are causing a problem, we can actually unbolt it and lift it up.
Now, Andrew, what's going on here?
Well, this is one of our beautiful tree ferns, Cyathea australis, and we thought it was such a remarkable plant that we designed the whole bridge around it. So, and then of course with this beautiful bird's nest fern.
Yeah, I like the bird's nest. That's great, isn't it?
Fantastic. Great Australian fern that's epiphytic. You know, it's a wonderful feature. This is one of our most unique ficus because it supports a whole lot of epiphytic plants. So we've got the dendrobiums, which are the native orchids, and then up further we've got the wonderful Splenium australasiacum, the bird's nest ferns.
And we've got them down here at ground level too. I mean, they're not as impressive, but they're still there.
Yeah, and it's amazing. These plants make a lot of sense because they don't require a lot of water and they'll often grow very well in deep shade.
One of the best things about this garden is its wealth of plants that deal with one of any gardener's toughest conditions, dry shade.
Microsorum pustulatum. I love this plant. I mean, it's native to Lord Howe Island.
My favourite place.
Beautiful. And it just grows as a carpet there. So you get this wonderful texture, and it often grows in combination with other ferns. But this is a really tough plant, and I can get it here, and it really gives me a great ground cover. It's as tough as nails.
Well, I have to say, this is a most beautiful looking fern. I love the texture it's got.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful texture, and this Asplenium bulbiferum, it's actually really quite tough. So while we think a lot of ferns need lots of shade and water, they need water to establish, they need filtered light, but this is actually a really good doer, and I would recommend this plant in home gardens.
Of course, plants that survive in dry shade do need some water, and the system has been designed to cope with anticipated future droughts.
The water flowing through the fern gully is connected to the water management in the entire botanic gardens. We've actually accessed an extra 70 meg of stormwater that comes into our lakes. We then reticulate it through the volcano, the Nymphaea Lake, and it flows down the fern gully. We actually circulate the entire body of water every 40 days, which is aerating the water. It then gets treated by plants and gets cleaned up, and we use that to re-irrigate back onto the actual plants.
I understand that this is just the first stage of further works that you're going to do here in the fern gully.
That's true. We have 3 stages, and so this is stage 1. Stage 2 is actually about renovating the Fern Gully Rest House, which is an old folly that sits within the gardens. And stage 3, which I am really genuinely very excited about, is where we're going to create a series of offline gardens. And when I mean offline, most people come through on the main path and it's quite busy. You'll be able to step off the main boardwalk, over stepping stones, sometimes over the water, and find some smaller intimate spaces, which will be more for just a small family group or an individual just to go in there and to think of a loved one or just to meditate about themselves, perhaps possibly even light a candle. So I think that's very exciting.
The reinvigorated fern gully certainly looks magnificent so far, and like all gardens, it will only get better with age.
Hanging baskets are a great way to get small plants up to eye level and to get colour and life into empty space. But I'm experimenting with another way to use traditional hanging baskets. I'm putting them together to make a sphere, and then I'm going to plant them with gorgeous succulents to make a succulent sphere like this one. Let me show you how. Line the 2 baskets with coconut fibre, as you normally would. I'm putting soaker hose in the basket that's going to go on top, so I can connect irrigation to it later. Next, fill the baskets with potting mix. I've found on earlier prototypes that I've made that I need to overfill because the potting mix will settle. To plant these out, we have to put the baskets flat side down. And obviously, you need to find a way to seal the bottom. So, what I've done is used a piece of old horsehair underlay, or you could even use hessian or shade cloth, and then cover it with a bit of aviary wire, which needs to be sewn in place. Bend over the sharp bits of the mesh so you don't scratch yourself. And use flexible wire to sew it onto the edge of the basket. Now I'm going to give it a good soak to make sure that the soil is fully saturated before I plant. But before I do that, I'm just going to use a bit of gaffer tape to cover the edge of this irrigation pipe so that we don't get any gunk into it. It's a good idea to put all the holes in before you put the plants in. It doesn't matter if you have too many. And I'm just being mindful not to hit the irrigation pipe. I don't really want to cut that. And now the plants. I'm going for a variety of succulents, but there are 2 that I'm going to use more of because I know they're good performers. One is Echeveria glauca or secunda. It's a great spreading variety and it won't get any height to it. And this one is Echeveria elegans. Again, it will spread. These 2 will help fill in the gaps. I've avoided using taller growing varieties because they'd upset the symmetry of the sphere. I'm separating individual plants and I'm also knocking off the excess potting soil before planting. I'm using small stakes to support the plants on the sides that are a bit loose and might fall out before their roots develop. I'm also planting some semperviviums or house sleeks. I love these plants. No got in full sun in South Australia, but great in shade, and these balls will be in a sheltered sunny position. And I'm also going to use a couple of different sedums that'll just fill in the gaps and soften the sphere. This one's looking pretty good, but I've still got the other half to do. Before you can join the two halves together, you need to leave them like this, bottom side down, to let the plants develop proper root system. Roots naturally grow down towards gravity, and that will take about 4 to 6 weeks. Once they're fully rooted, then you can join the two halves together to make a sphere. All you do is hang the top basket, and then, with an extra pair of hands, put the bottom basket into position and join them together. I use fencing clips on this one, but you could use something like cable ties. Now you'll see we're under shade cloth. Even though succulents are hardy and water-wise, in small pots in full sun in South Australia, they will certainly stress. So find a position in semi-shade and they'll grow well. This sphere isn't established yet, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what it looks like as it fills in and grows. If, like me, you like to have fun in the garden and you want to let your inner creativity go wild, why not build a succulent sphere this weekend?
I'm back at Barb Wickes' sublime subtropical cottage garden to look at her extensive and surprising plant collection. Is that a Camellia cracknelliana over there?
It is. I just love the trunk of that.
It's a wonderful colour. I haven't seen that for ages.
I didn't ever realise it would grow that big, but it's beautiful. And over here we have Anise hyssop.
That's a beautiful plant. That's as tasty as it is aromatic. If you're into Vietnamese cookery, that's an essential ingredient. Great for bees too.
We've also got the campanula here, which is really stunning in a cottage garden.
You would never expect to see it growing in Queensland.
No, I guess not, but I've always had it. I think I brought it with me from Victoria, and it does so well.
And Stokesia, that brings joy to my heart. I rarely see that plant grown, but it used to be quite popular.
Very popular, but you very rarely see it in Queensland. And it does extremely well, and I try and propagate a bit of it and get it out there amongst friends, but you don't find it in nurseries.
The way Barb gets it out there is through a group she helped to set up, the Perennial Poppies, one of Australia's biggest and I think best gardening clubs.
We're 15 years old now, and we've got a wonderful membership and who all just love gardens. They love sharing. So many of our plants are plants that you can't buy in a nursery, and it's so important to get them out there, particularly the old-fashioned ones.
What my eye is drawn to is this plant. Now, this is something you very rarely see. What is it?
It's the Ceratophyta triloba, the summer foxglove.
And if any plant were to encapsulate what this garden is about, it would be that.
That's
right. You can't get hold of it in the retail industry, can you?
No, no. We collect the seeds, they go in our seed bank, so we're spreading it far and wide amongst our members.
And you've got that beautiful solanum. It's a lovely colour.
It is gorgeous at this time of year.
Now, you've got some alternatives to cool climate plants, like this euphorbia.
Yes, Euphorbia cotonifolia, and I call it our answer to the cotinus, the smoke bush.
Which is a really cold-demanding plant, but this is equally beautiful and quite drought-tolerant.
Oh, it is, yes, very drought-tolerant.
And just above us is a spectacular tree. Now, this is a native alternative to laburnum.
That's right.
And it's...
Cassia brewsteri. Variety tomentella.
That's it, that's it. And anybody that wants to grow laburnum, well, here's your alternative, and you can grow it right in the subtropics.
Yes, I think it's the most magnificent tree.
And over there, you've got an alternative hydrangea.
Yes,
What's that?
Dichroa versicolor, and it flowers in both pink and blue, and it'll take sun and shade. It will grow to any height. That was 15 feet high back 6 months ago, but you can grow it as a hedge of 3 or 4 feet. So
it's as good as a hydrangea, but
yes,
even more versatile.
Yes, wonderful plant.
Barb's collecting passion extends to her veggie patch, and what caught my eye was the spinach.
Over here we have Suriname spinach, and I enjoy this plant. I use it in my stir fries.
It's got a lovely juicy crunch when it's fresh.
Yes,
I like it too.
Yes, yeah. And one of my favourites is Brazilian spinach here. I use that in stir fries. And over on the other side there, Jerry, is Okinawa spinach, which is a new acquisition for me, and I'm loving using that in salads.
This is a beautifully designed garden with a clear emphasis on perennials. But here, Barb grows and acclimatises over 1,000 different plants. In effect, this is a subtropical botanical garden of high cultural significance. And it's great for the soul too.
Well, that's it yet again. I think I'll get crafty and try to make one of Sophie's succulent spheres as well. And I hope we've inspired you to do the same. Until next week, happy gardening.
Are you short of room but keen to create a beautiful garden? Well, I'll show you how thoughtful design can lead to amazing results and a feeling of space.
I'll be visiting some evocative courtyard gardens that were designed to remind us of the environments where Australians served in wartime, and talking to the designer.
I didn't think I'd ever meet someone who loved figs and prickly pears as much as I do. But I've met my match.